Hello and welcome to Community Partnerships, helping everyone learn prevention, a series designed to help inform, educate, and prevent abuse of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs and related consequences, such as interpersonal violence. In this segment, we will be discussing the dangers of heroin, including the recent increase in the presence and use of heroin locally, how heroin directly impacted one individual's life, and we'll conclude this video with an understanding about the dangerous connection between prescription drug abuse and heroin use. So let's get started. Heroin is a highly addictive opioid that often leaves the user with a craving for their original high known as chasing the dragon. By appearance, heroin is a white or brown powder or a sticky variation known as black tar. Typically, the users inject the drug, but it can be smoked, ingested, or snorted. Oftentimes, when someone thinks of heroin, they have an image of a strung-out junkie with a spoon and lighter in an alleyway or abandoned building. While this extreme stereotype of addiction does occur, experts recognize that a more common occurrence now is a transition away from more costly prescription drug abuse to a more affordable pill form of heroin. Addiction is characterized by both a physical and mental response, which urges the user to continue use of the drug to avoid withdrawal symptoms. The addictive nature of heroin is such that the body of the user quickly becomes tolerant of the drug, therefore increasing the need for more of the drug to get the same high. Heroin is classified as an opioid depressant and causes both short and long-term health effects. The immediate result of using heroin is a decrease in the activity of the brain and nervous system. This is why heroin users go on the nod, which means they are alternately awake and drowsy with very slowed breathing. Studies have found that heroin can deteriorate areas of the brain that control decision-making abilities and regulation of behavior. Potential health conditions associated with heroin abuse include fatal overdose, spontaneous abortion, and infectious diseases like hepatitis and HIV from sharing needles. Chronic users may develop collapsed veins, abscesses, and liver or kidney disease. Other complications such as pneumonia may result from the poor health of the user. Beginning around 2010, law enforcement and other drug experts were seeing an increase in heroin use nationwide. Here in Southwest Missouri, this alarming reality is no different. To illustrate, the Special Investigations Unit of the Springfield Police Department report not only a rise in the number of heroin arrests since 2011, but the amount of heroin seized through search warrants, drug buys, and proactive drug cases has also increased. Over a 3-year period, just this one law enforcement unit saw the amount of heroin seized increase from 13 to 243 grams. This increase in the presence of heroin is seen locally as well as at the state level. Recently, we had an opportunity to speak with Scott Collier with the Drug Enforcement Agency, and he spoke about the alarming presence of heroin in our state.
It is on the rise in areas that we've never seen it before, in rural, not just urban and suburban, but rural parts of Missouri. Just based on the overdose numbers, where we've gone from 0 to 10 in rural counties, it's just unheard of. We know the sellers of heroin have dropped their prices in an effort to compete with particularly the young people who are paying a premium for pharmaceutical narcotics and are having difficulty maintaining that high because it's gotten very expensive. They're undercutting the price with the heroin, and they're getting them involved there.
We also talked with an undercover law enforcement officer who gave us more insight into heroin being a local problem.
Heroin has been around for eons. It has prevalently been an East Coast problem. Philadelphia and those bigger cities on the East Coast have been dealing with heroin addiction for 30 years. It has never been this prevalent in our area. I've been in narcotics for 7 years, and just within the last year is when I could go out and find it on the streets readily.
Law enforcement seem to agree that not only cost, but also supply and demand are driving this increase in heroin locally.
Obviously demand. I mean, it's the same with any product out there. If you don't have a demand for it, there's no need for the supply. So just in my opinion, from what we've seen, we have such a huge problem with prescription drug addiction. If they can't find their prescription drugs, they're going to go to heroin.
It might seem a big leap to go from pain medications prescribed by a doctor to heroin, but due to the similar nature of these opioids, it is a step that is often taken by medication abusers.
Nobody starts out being a heroin addict. I've not come across anybody that just went straight to heroin. It is, in our circumstances down here, everybody that we've dealt with has been a prescription drug abuser, and then somebody introduces them to heroin because it's an opiate, and then they just get so entrenched in that addiction that, it just results in death. Heroin, in my opinion, just based on what I've seen, is it is such a harsh drug. Its purity level is so high that's why we're seeing so many overdose deaths from it. You take a kid who's taken 20 oxys a day, or whatever their level of pill usage is, and then they start taking heroin, and a lot of times they don't realize how much more potent heroin is than any other drug out there. So my concern is the number of overdose deaths that we're having.
We have illustrated that heroin is a dangerous and often deadly drug. However, recovery from heroin is possible. Prevention specialist Nick Clinton was able to interview Rock Higgins, who shared his firsthand account of addiction to heroin and his process of recovery.
Rock Higgins was eager to share the story of his life, which was devastated for more than a decade with heroin addiction and the consequences of that addiction. He shares it in hopes of preventing others from trying heroin and helping his community become educated about the dangers of heroin use. He began at an early age.
I started off smoking marijuana, and I was never big on marijuana because it used to have me too paranoid. And then I started dropping pills, and so by the time I was 16, I tried heroin. They had always had this old saying, once you jack, you'll never go back, and that means shooting up. So I tried it for the first time, which was really kind of scary because growing up in school, I couldn't stand to get a shot, And so I didn't ever think that I would be an IV user, But once I tried it, I guess it was, like I said, at the age of 16, the first time that I tried it, it was something that I enjoyed, And it started from that point on, from the age of 16 to the age of 42.
Finding himself sinking further into his addiction, Higgins accounts the effect it took on his life.
Well, it really started destroying my life because like I said, I started going to jail. My first incarceration was in 1976, and at that time, I had been in rehab, and one of the staff members had told me in rehab that, if I didn't stop using drugs, I was going to end up in prison or in the grave. It just really started destroying my life because I didn't see the effect that it was really having on my family as well. The biggest effect that I seen is the things that I put my mother through, going in and out of jail, calling her all times at night, asking her to come make my bond for me to get me out of jail. I guess the biggest thing that happened we lived in the projects, and my mother gave me the money to go pay the rent. And I took the money and went and bought drugs with it. And it was a week later, we was evicted. And behind that, kind of broke our family up. My brother went his way, my sister went her way. My mother really didn't have a place to go. And my family just kind of separated at that point.
Higgins was blinded by his cravings for the drug, and it was not until he got clean that he began to see the destruction caused by his drug use.
My last incarceration, I went to prison for shoplifting. I stole a jacket, it was $63, and I ended up with a 7-year sentence. And I can say today that was the best incarceration I could have ever received. Because if the judge would have took me in a courtroom and gave me a fine or placed me on probation and let me walk out the courtroom, I'd have continued on the path. But instead, I ended up with a 7-year sentence, and they sent me to long-term treatment.
Higgins is now active in recovery efforts and tries to help others escape their addictions. From his perspective, heroin was not a part of the scene in Springfield when he moved here, but now it's a different story.
I got out of prison and came to Springfield in October of '98, and heroin was not even heard of in this community. If it was, it may have been very few people that was involved with it, and it was so low-key that you really didn't hear anything about heroin, you know. And so to see it from '98 to 2014, it being off the chain, I mean, because I'm involved with recovery and I go to a lot of meetings, and I see a lot of younger kids coming in today that's have heroin's addiction. So it's a tremendous change. It's a tremendous change in the community.
We are grateful for Rock's willingness to share his story. It's also important to remember what we've learned so far, that almost no one starts out using heroin. Several recent studies have shown that nearly 50% of all adolescents and young adults who inject heroin report previous prescription opioids abuse. Other individuals reported taking up heroin because it is cheaper and easier to obtain than prescription opioids. This is one reason that it is very important that medications are taken as prescribed by the person they are prescribed for, and that unused or expired medications are disposed of safely. In many communities, there are medication take-back events, or law enforcement agencies have installed permanent drop boxes in their lobbies. There is a list of permanent drop boxes available at the web address on your screen. If you are not in an area where these are available, you can find more information on how to dispose of medications at the second address on your screen. The presence of heroin rightfully poses concerns for our communities, and we encourage you to engage in the prevention of its use. There are several ways to get involved, including assisting at medication take-back events and joining community-led prevention efforts that seek to prevent abuse from starting. Scott Collier with the DEA points out that communities have an important role in the prevention of drug abuse.
At the end of the day, this is all about helping your community. And what better place to start than with the people in that community? You don't need an outsider, you don't need the feds to come in and do this for you. We need to do it ourselves. Everybody has a role to play.
If you'd like to take an active role toward addressing drug abuse where you live, contact us at Community Partnership and we'll be glad to help you find a way to join prevention efforts. Another way to make a difference in the community involves reaching out to youth to have a conversation about the risks and consequences of heroin use. Youth do listen when trusted adults talk with them. We suggest you begin by having a frank discussion about the research and realities of prescription abuse. Teaching kids to make healthy and wise choices about alcohol, tobacco, and medications will help them reduce the likelihood that they will abuse them or try other illicit substances. For more information on how to have those conversations, watch our Help video segment on how to talk to your kids. Thank you for watching Helping Everyone Learn Prevention, an alcohol, drug, and violence prevention series developed by your Regional Support Center, Community Partnership of the Ozarks. If you'd like to know more about this program or have Community Partnership present at your organization, classroom, or community, contact us at 417-888-2020 or visit the web address on your screen.